and regulation of the procurement activities of the government and for other purposes, enacted in July 22, 2002. In 2016, it was revised with its IRR, and still the same Government Procurement Reform Act. And its purpose is to prescribe for the necessary rules and regulations for the modernization, standardization, and regulation of the procurement activities of the government of the Philippines. And this one has strictly streamlined all the procedures in procurement, which is strictly adhered by DPWH and its procurement manual. It would have different manual for goods and services, consulting services, and infrastructure. The key features of GPRA, or the Government Procurement Revised Act, is that it covers procurement of all government agencies, no exception. And as a general rule, it is a competitive bidding or otherwise known as public bidding, meaning you can scrutinize it, you can witness it, it is not discreet. The alternative methods of procurement is allowed in highly exceptional cases when there is a need for urgency, or otherwise you need to expedite and you don't have to go through the usual process of procurement, which we'll be discussing later. And we have now the approved budget for the contract. We call this one ABC as ceiling for the bid price, and you can't go beyond that. There is the use of transparent, objective, and non-discretionary criteria. And as well as there's an increased transparency in the procurement process because you can view it anywhere you want. And professionalization of procurement officials. This time, there is accreditation and training of procurement officials. You cannot just sit in there and be a procurement official. You have to undergo the training and be certified. And lastly, it has an exclusive penal and civil liability. So to do away with collusion and intervention in the bidding process. So the contractor would be held liable as well as the government official. Moving on, prior to the GPRA, there were problems along the way. And basically the confusion caused by fragmented legal system. There is no uniform standard for the procurement process. Now we have the GPRA, the enactment of the Government Procurement Reform Act. And because of the confusion, there were inconsistent policies, rules, and regulations due to lack of standards. So the creation of Government Procurement Policy Board, where it is the Bible of procurement. And we have lack of transparency. Most of the time, we just bid with the contractor and the bids and award committee. But now, you can just go through all the projects, check the contractors at the Philippine Government Electronic Procurement System, or the PhilGEPS. So you can see what's the next project coming up in a particular province or area. And prior to GPRA, there was this lack of check and balance. Now, during the bidding, you have participation of civil society. So you will have the Commission on Audit sit there and witness the process. We also have some accredited civil organizations, anti-corruption groups that might want to sit there as long as they are accredited. Now, prior to GPRA, you have an eclectic load of executive orders, administrative issuances, and circulars. And we have over 100 procurement rules and regulations, and they're put into one. And now we have the Government Procurement Reform Act, which covers all goods, infrastructures, and consulting services. And the coverage would be national government agencies, as well as local government units. Now, how does it apply? It applies to national government agencies, state universities and colleges, or USTP. We have MSU IIT, we have UP, government-owned and or controlled corporations, GSIS, government financial institutions, the SSS, local government units or LGUs, barangays, the city. And it also governs the procurement of infrastructure, goods, which include supplies, materials, and related services. Also, it covers consulting services. The scope and coverage of this GPRA, as stipulated in Section 4 revised IRR, are all fully domestically funded procurement activities. Also, it includes foreign funded procurement activities unless otherwise provided in a treaty or international executive agreement. Now, mandate adherence to RA 9184 or selection through competitive bidding. When there is negotiated bidding instead of the public bidding, the procurement should be clearly reflected in the records of discussion to promote transparency, as found in Section 4.3 of the 2016 IRR. As may be agreed upon by the government of the Philippines and international financing institutions in their treaty or international executive agreement. So this includes projects funded from foreign grants, projects for international competitive bidding, and consulting services for national competitive bidding. Now let's talk about exceptions. First one is the procurement for goods, infrastructure projects, and consulting services funded from foreign grants covered by Republic Act 8182, as amended by Republic Act 8555. This is entitled An Act Excluding Official Development Assistance, or ODA, from foreign debt limit in order to facilitate absorption and optimize the utilization of ODA. Just clearly stating, these ones that go through the usual procurement process, because these are foreign grants or loans, and they should be expedited. So the longer it takes, the more interest the government of the Philippines will have to incur. So they have to speed up this project just to make sure that it will be completed on time. Otherwise, it will compound its interest. Okay? And number two is acquisition of real property, which shall be governed by RA 8974, as amended by RA 10752. It is entitled An Act to Facilitate the Acquisition of Right-of-Way, Site, or Location for National Government Infrastructure Projects and for other purposes. And it would have other applicable laws as it would include titles of lands. So it is quite complex. So it is not covered in a GPRA, but with other applicable laws. Okay? Now, we also have public-private sector infrastructure or development projects, another procurement covered by RA 6957, as amended by RA 7718, which is the Build, Operate, Transfer Law, entitled An Act Authorizing the Financing, take note, construction and operation, and maintenance of infrastructure projects by the private sector and for other purposes. In this case, BOT is for the government grants concession to a private company to finance, construct, and operate at a particular time frame. Most, in general, will be about 20 to 30 years, and then they have to return back to the government. Now, for specific projects which are BOT here in Cagayan de Oro, we have the Pogon Public Market, which is a BOT project of the UKC. We also have the Procurement Public Market, also a BOT project, still by UKC. We also have our slaughterhouse in Kugman from a good friend, Erwin. And also included here in the exceptions are the disposal of government properties as commission and so not procurement direct financial or material assistance to beneficiaries. Okay? And then free studies or participation to scholarship, trainings, and continuing education. Lease of government property for private use and job order workers. Joint venture agreements between private entities and GOCCs or LGUs, and the disposal of property and assets. Under Section 4.5 of the 2016 IRR of RA 9184. Now let's be clear about things. Let us try to define procurement. And it refers to the acquisition of goods, consulting services, and the contracting for infrastructure projects by the procuring entity. And most logically, our government. Now, what are goods? It refers to all items, supplies, and materials, including general support services needed in the transaction of public businesses or in the pursuit of any government undertaking, project, or activity. Whether in the nature of equipment, furniture, stationery, materials, or construction, from bond paper to the moving equipment or heavy equipment, it is considered under goods. Also, the repair and maintenance of equipment and furniture, the trucking, hauling, janitorial, and security and other related and analogous services, except for infrastructure projects or consulting services. So this is the scope of goods. Now for infrastructure projects, it refers to construction, improvement, demolition, rehabilitation, repair, restoration, or maintenance of civil works and components like the IT projects, irrigation, and now clearly flood control and drainage, which we have a lot here in Cagayan de Oro, water supply, sanitation, sewage, and solid waste management, national buildings, hospital buildings, and other related construction projects of the government. As to, well, to give you an example, all other projects like building of roads. Personally, we have gone through procurement of some government projects. And as the moment, for infrastructure, we are undergoing like construction of concreting of roads in Libuna and also in Lagindingan. Basically, we have to go through a lot of requirements just to be part of the bidding. And with that, you take the risk of paying for the bid documents, which is non-reimbursable, in order for you to, well, get the project if you win the bidding, which is a public bidding. Now, for consulting services, we have projects or activities of the government requiring adequate external, technical, and professional expertise that are beyond the capability or capacity of the government to undertake, such as but not limited to advisory and review services, pre-investment or feasibility studies, design, construction and supervision, management, and related services, other technical services, or special studies. So those specialized construction or work, which we have not done before here in the Philippines and we have right now, then we would need consulting services from other countries who are more adept and would have the expertise and experience to do such project or consultancy. Now for mixed procurement, in case of projects involving mixed procurements, the nature of the procurement shall be determined based on the primary purpose of the contract. What is the purpose of the contract then? So determination shall be made by the procuring entity or the PE. So in mixed procurements, the PE shall specify the bidding documents, all requirements applicable to each component of the project. So this goes through with what I mentioned, the bidding documents. It would have different and more tedious requirement. The PE shall ensure compliance with the existing laws, rules, and regulations, especially those concerning licenses and permits required for the project. So they would also check if you have the capacity to perform and comply with the project at hand. You have the resources, and most of the time they also include BIR certificates and your financial status and also your bank accounts, just to make sure that you're a legit contractor or a consultant in that manner. Okay, so we have mixed procurement, and the PE or the procuring entity is in the best position to determine the correct classification of its procurement based on its identified needs and the best way by which these needs may be addressed, managed, and satisfied. So it is the motivation or the intention of the PE, like the Philippine government, to pursue projects that will determine the primary purpose of such project. Okay? So just make sure that with that, they would have and instill the principles of public procurement, which is transparency, which is already answered by the implementation and the evidence of our dynamic electronic system, which is online, the field jets. Okay? So it is the primary source of information with regard to procurement by Philippine government. Also the efficiency, the streamlined procurement process, equity and fairness. That's why we have opened biddings for everyone to evaluate and see, to do away with collusion and intervention. And there is competition. This will procurement here in Philippine government under GPRA would not allow monopoly of the supplier or contractor. There should be also accountability and public monitoring and value for money, as in they have to determine the highest and best use of a particular project, and those implementing agencies will have the capacity to perform it. Now for procurement methods and procedure, all procurement shall be done through competitive bidding. As what we have mentioned, it is a public bidding under RA 9184. But there will be alternative methods in some cases, like highly exceptional cases, and those which should promote economy and efficiency, and those justified by conditions specified by RA 9184 and its IRR. So the usual rule here is under competitive bidding or public bidding. So with regard to goods, infrastructure, and consultancy, you can do competitive or public bidding. Okay. We also have limited source bidding. Okay. For this limited source bidding, otherwise known as a selective bidding. Okay. And you can only do that for the procurement of goods. Okay. As well as for consulting services. What is that? Limited source bidding. Okay. It involves direct invitation to bid by the concerned entity of all pre-selected suppliers or consultants with known experience and proven capability. So there are only a few bidders here, limited source bidding, which are really tested and proven to perform particular project. Okay. We also have the direct contracting, which you can have for goods only. What is direct contracting? Okay. It is a single source procurement and is a method of the procurement of goods that does not require elaborate bidding documents. Because the supplier is simply asked to submit a price quotation or a pro forma invoice together with the conditions of sale. Okay. We also have repeat order, and as you will notice, it's only applicable for goods Otherwise, if you apply that one for infra,
This second column, which is a preparation of bidding documents, is mostly the documents required for the bidding process. And the last column is the conduct of bidding, the overall bidding process of procurement. Okay. For project procurement management plan, it requires procurement contract ID, name, location, based on NEP or GAA. And when we say NEP is prior to GAA, there's an issuance of we call NEP, which is the National Expenditure Program. And also in the PPMP, a brief scope of work, indicative final ABC, readiness of contract, completed and approved detailed engineering design, completed and approved bidding documents, budget and right of way plan, and contract implementation schedule. On this is how many days the contract will be implemented. The procurement method, whether it is a competitive bidding or other manner of bidding. However, in the case of the infrastructure project and other consultancy and the goods, the general rule is competitive bidding, and we have this procurement schedule. So it could be done in daily basis or in a weekly basis. Next is the detailed engineering design plus the approved budget for the contract. So please bear with me when I discuss more technical terms. The scope of detailed engineering is the design standards, the field surveys and investigation, the design analysis, plans design report, contract plans, technical specifications and quantity estimates, cost estimates and ABC, program of work, including schedule and contract packaging, and right of way and the settlement action plan, utilities relocation plan, environmental impact statement, construction safety and health program, equipment requirements, and currently we have a new one which is we call it value engineering studies. So there will be an options of engineering designs which is more as in terms of value, as to in terms of cost. So we have to compare those studies, and we have this contract time or duration and warranty period and preparation of bidding documents. And I want to emphasize this part, this is the most important one, the cost estimates and ABC. This is how we program the total cost of the project involving all the raw materials involved during the implementation. We have a degree of accuracy 5 to 10%. So we are only allowed to have this kind of accuracy or error for certain estimates. And detailed engineering budget, 3 to 6% of the estimated contract cost. Okay. As to the derivation of our cost estimates, we have a database in particular in DPWH. We have a database for prices. We call it construction materials price data. No? Every district engineering offices from Malaybalay, Cagayan de Oro, Hingog City, Ligan City will submit a list of prices of the materials and equipment. So we are transparent as to the availability and the availability of these prices. So as to transparency, names of those who are involved in the acquisition of these prices are put into writing, and they submit this list of cost materials price data quarterly basis. And what happens with the occurrence of war, the price data shoots up And I have a example for that. For examples which are, I think, a very alarming prices increase. Like a ready-mix concrete, which is an increase of 11.30%, and precast concrete, an increase of 129%, and the reinforcing steel bars with an increase of 25.34%, and for our gravel, which is the basic raw materials for making concrete, is around 17.65% increase. For the bidding process for goods and infrastructure projects, this is the flow, or this is the process. We start from pre-procurement conference. We do with the pre-procurement conference, we identify the ABC and the scope of work and the location of the project and the type of work. Once the procurement conference is done, we will advertise through PhilJeps. We will post the invitation to bid for the bidders to participate in the submission of their bidding documents. And once it is advertised, we will go next with the pre-bid conference, wherein we will the items of work is more detailed, the scope of work, the quantities, and the even the equipment and materials to be used will be shown in the pre-bid conference, will be discussed. Any issues concerning such project will be brought up in the pre-bid conference. During the opening of bids, no more raising of issues on the time. So all issues regarding the projects for the implementation will be raised at the pre-bid conference. And we have this bidding, which is the bidding proper, we call it. So this is the contractor, where the contractor will submit their individual bids or bid submission. Each contractor will submit two types of proposals, which is composed of technical proposal, including the eligibility documents, and we have this financial proposal. When we say technical proposal, is on how they derive their own estimates for the said project, and including those projects that we have currently and when previously implemented. And with the financial proposal is the financial standing of the contractor. And once upon with this bidding process, technically the bidding process is more on a pass and failed criteria. So once the availability of the said documents, it will pass. And once the presence and absence of the documents, so once the absence of such document, then it will be declared as failed. And the detailed evaluation of the bids will be processed in the bid evaluation. So all technical personnel will evaluate such bids. And we have this post qualification. This is to validate or to evaluate the availability of equipments of the contractors and their capacity to provide such project or goods. And once qualified, once passed under the post qualification, and the contractor will be awarded of a contract and then a notice to proceed. There is a little difference between the consulting services. So there is eligibility and shortlisting. Then we have this pre-bid conference, and we have this bid submission and opening of bids. The opening of bids is referred using the quality-based evaluation or quality cost-based evaluation, and then you have this bid evaluation and post qualification, and the most important here is the negotiation. This is where the consultant would like to negotiate or to add another scope of work or other details with the